podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all four, will you get that message that says this content is not available in your location? A Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services, while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package which is instantly downloadable to your device and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show. What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Friday. It is the 19th of July. Hope you're all having yourselves a tremendous day. We're going to start with questions, because obviously wasn't here yesterday. We do have, I think, 3 questions to get into. So, Matt JT, I'm of the belief that United kept Ten Hag just to keep the seat warm until Southgate is ready to take over sometime this year, like when Liverpool kept Rodgers waiting for Klopp. Do you think that's possible? And if that's the case, who are some of the players United could sign this summer with Southgate in mind, like Liverpool did with Firmino? Oh, that's interesting, because the thing is, when Liverpool were waiting on Klopp, like, we kind of knew what Klopp's style of play was. We knew that he wanted to play a high-pressing style. We knew that it was very attack-minded and quite aggressive. We don't really know what Southgate would do in club football, because it's been an awful long time since he managed at club level and it wasn't very good. International football is a completely different ballgame. If he's going to go to a club like United, I just don't see that he can play the same way that he played with England and hope for the same type of results, because if that does happen, he won't last more than 6 months at the club. So I don't really know what he would look to do. If he wants to play a 4-2-3-1, which I feel like it's between that and the 3-4-1-2 is what he actually wants to play, and just didn't have the confidence in himself to go and do it for England. I do wonder, like, you look at some of the players United have, I kind of feel like Delo and Shaw are the type of fullbacks / wingbacks that Southgate would like. I feel like he obviously really likes Maguire. We know that. So could you go Yoro, Maguire, Martinez as a back three with Delo and Shaw as wingbacks? I mean, there's similarities in a way between Pickford and Onana. There's both, similar flows. Both are not the highest intelligence players. Both make simplistic errors. Both can be excellent shot stoppers, and both are comfortable receiving the ball. I feel like he'd like a Declan Rice. Now, United look like they're signing Ugarte, who's not a Rice type, but there are some similarities in that he's at his best when he's freed up to go and just win the ball back high up the pitch and be aggressive and, close down space and be that destroyer type. But Southgate has used Rice in a different type of way to what makes Rice such a good player. I still think he wants a Calvin Phillips in alongside that player, though. So who's the Calvin Phillips that's out there? Like, Phillips is a unique enough type of player in that he was a box-to-box 8 till Bielsa got hold of him. And Bielsa took what was a good championship box-to-box 8 with the potential to be a bottom-half Premier League player and turned that into a 6 that's, good enough to play for a lot of the top half teams. I know he's had a couple of bad years since going to City, but he was really good for Leeds. He's got a lot of energy. He's aggressive. He's very clever. He shields the defence well. He's good on the ball. Somebody like Calvin Phillips, I feel like it'd be something to watch for. But again, we don't know what Southgate is going to want. He clearly likes Mainu. He doesn't know how to use him, but he clearly likes him. The wingers, I feel like the United wingers would suit Southgate because I think Diallo can do a lot of the same things as Saka. Not as good, obviously, but, similar enough profile. I actually think the United squad would be well enough suited to what Southgate wants to do in a 4-2-3-1 or a 3-4-1-2. I actually do think that is the plan. I think Southgate is who they want. And I wouldn't be surprised if come November, Ten Hag is out and Southgate is in. If they start badly, of course, Isaac Gilding. Hoping Euros are over. Love the daily pods. As someone who watched both, can you rank the teams from the knockout rounds of both competitions, assuming the respective winners end up in positions 1 and 2? How do you think a game between the two would play out? We'll do that first before we come on to the last question. The last question from Isaac. So there's 2 in that. So the first one is to rank the, I suppose, 24 teams from the round of 16 in the Euros and the last 8 in the Copa. So let's do that. Number 1, I'm going to go Spain. I'm just going to go with Spain as the best team. Number 2, I will go Argentina. Number 3, I'm going to go Germany. 4, I will go Uruguay. 5, Colombia. And I know they beat Uruguay. I still think Uruguay are a better team. 6, I'll go France. 7, I'll go England. 8, I'll go Portugal. 9, I'll go Brazil. No, I'll go Ecuador. Then 10, I'll go Brazil. 11 will go Denmark. 12, Switzerland. 13, the Netherlands. 14, Turkey. 15, Belgium. 16, Canada. And I know they got to the semi-finals and all the rest, but that's where I'd put them. 17, Venezuela. 18, Austria. 19, Slovakia. 20, Italy. 21, Georgia. 22, Slovenia. 23, Romania, and last I'd go Panama. So that's the first question. The second one is how do I think a final works out? Well, I think Spain dominate the ball. I think Argentina are happy for them to dominate the ball. I think Argentina look to use counterattacks, quick transitions. I think they look to be really aggressive and front-footed. I'd imagine Julian Alvarez spends more time playing as a 10 behind Messi so that he can press and harass Rodri. I do think Argentina would have a tough time stopping the Spanish wingers because Tagliafico's not the best defensively, and I do think Lamine Yamal cutting infield off him would be very problematic for England. And obviously for Argentina, and you do with Nico Williams, you do have that cheat code of pace that no real fullback is going to be able to match. So if he's cutting infield off the ball, while Yamal is cutting infield with the ball, we'll see a lot of what we saw in the Euros final. That first goal, I think we see that multiple times. Now, I do think Argentina have a lot more ways to cause Spain trouble going forward because I think they use the ball better. And they have Leo Messi. Now, we're going to assume a fully fit Leo Messi. A fully fit Leo Messi is very hard for Spain to pick up because they're not going to send one of their centre-backs to go with him when he drifts out onto the wings, when he drops off the front a little bit. So I'd imagine when Spain have the ball, Messi is the 9, Alvarez is the 10. But when Argentina get the ball, I think that switches. And if Argentina can get Messi out playing in between midfield and defence in the half spaces, and if Spain have to send a centre-back with him, that's going to leave one centre-back isolated 1v1 with Julian Alvarez. Now, Alvarez is not the quickest, but he does have really good movement. He gets his shots away very quickly, and he's got really good shot placement, which is a very underrated trait. I think it's the primary trait that Diogo Jota has that makes him such an effective frontman. I think Alvarez is excellent in that regard as well. I quite like the central midfield matchup of Enzo and De Paul against Rodri and Ruiz, but I think Rodri and Ruiz wins that matchup. I think overall Spain win the game. I think they win it like 3-1, but I do think Argentina have a path to beating them. And if Argentina get the first goal, you could very well see them frustrate Spain, slow the game down, use cheap fouls, cynical fouls, a little bit of the dark arts sprinkled in. I think you could see them in game move Martinez to left back, where I think he'd have a better chance against Lamol just because he's more aggressive. And I think he might be able to physically dominate Yamal and take him out of the game. But it would mean bringing someone like Otamendi in, but not the biggest issue when you're going up against Alvaro Morata, which is the sort of one of the weak points in the Spain team. Now, as I've said, both of these teams in a year, I think, will look a little bit different. The Spanish match winners are going to be Nico Williams and Dani Olmo. And Olmo's very problematic for Argentina, playing between the lines. If you watch the Ecuador-Argentina game, Moises Caicedo played the 10. And he's not someone you think of as creative passer. But because he was active, he's good on the turn and he's quick with how and when he plays the ball. He was able to cover or to cause Argentina a lot of problems, especially in that opening half. We saw James Rodriguez have a lot of joy in that first half as well. And I think Danny Olmo would have a lot of joy against him. So I'm going to say that Spain would win 3-1. I do think it'd be a really good game and an interesting game, but I think if Spain get ahead, they win that game. A third question, while it's still relevant this week, is Carlos Alcaraz better at tennis at 21 than Lamine Yamal is at football at 16, 17? Oh, that is interesting. I would say yes. I would say he is. Look, as I've said before, nobody ever did what Lamine Yamal was doing at 16. That is incredible. But at the same time, nobody has Lamine Yamal in the top 20 players in the world. Because right now, he's not a top 20 player in world football. Whereas Carlos Alcaraz is, I think, fairly unanimously seen as the best tennis player in the world right now. I think he's overtaken Novak Djokovic. I think he's ranked number 3 at the moment, but I don't see that you can argue that he's number 1 right now. I'm trying to think, what other players have been that good that early? So if we look at, I think Federer is the best player I've ever seen. He didn't win his first Grand Slam until he was 22. Well, the year he turned 22. He won Wimbledon the summer he turned 22. So that doesn't compare with Alcaraz, who's won 4 and doesn't turn 22. He's just turned 21. He's also won, obviously, back-to-backs now this year, and I think we'll go into the US Open as favourite. The one thing he has to do is conquer Australia, which I do think he will do. Djokovic is currently ranked number 2. But again, I just don't see right now that you could put him ahead of Alcaraz, who's just won the last 2 Grand Slams. Just trying to think who else was doing it this early. If we look back at the greats, Bjorn Borg. Borg would be the answer. Yeah, Bjorn Borg, I think, would be the answer to. He's the only one that did more at this age. Like, he won his first Grand Slam, I think, at 18. And he had won. So he turned 21 in 1977. He had won 1, 2, 3, 4. To be fair, he won his 5th in 77. So Alcaraz is right on that kind of trajectory. Agassi won his first one in 92 at Wimbledon. He was 22. But his best years came a couple of years after that. Sampras obviously was incredible. And he won his first at 19. He might even have been 8. No, he was 19 when he won the US Open. But then he didn't win for a few years, and he was 22, 23 when he really started to churn them out. McEnroe was in his mid-20s. Oh, no, he won his first at like 20. But I wouldn't say McEnroe was as good as Alcaraz at this point, for sure. Jimmy Connors, I mean, this is way before anyone I know. Like, my mom was a huge tennis fan, so like she's the one that kind of has told me about McEnroe and Borg, because they're the two that she loved. And she maintains Bjorn Borg is the best tennis player she's ever seen. I mean, Rafa Nadal was pretty young when he was dominating the French Open, but he didn't win anywhere else until he was 22. I think he's the best 21-year-old tennis player since Borg. I could be wrong, but there might be somebody I'm missing here. But that's how I feel about it. And I feel like he's the best tennis player in the world right now. And I don't think anyone has Yamal in their top 20. Now, I think the real question is, will Yamal be better at football at 21 than Alcaraz is right now? Because remember, Alcaraz turned pro at like 15, 16, so a similar type of age to Lamine Yamal. Lamine Yamal has had a better first year of his career without question. He's got a couple of years before he gets to the point where, Alcaraz was 19 when he started to win the majors and started to really establish himself as one of the elite players on the planet. Can Lamine Yamal do that? By the time he's 19, turning 20, say, is there going to be a case that Lamine Yamal is one of the 5 best players in the world? And then by 21, is he the best player in the world? I would say right now the answer is Alcaraz, but I wouldn't rule out the fact that 21, Lamine Yamal might be the best player in the world. It's 4 years from now. It's ludicrous to think that it's 4 years till he turns 21, given what we've already seen him do. Final question is from Rick M. How highly do you rate Reed Shepherd and Zach Edey? So Zach Edey, coming out of Purdue, drafted a lot higher than I think he was originally expected to go, going to the Memphis Grizzlies with the number 9 pick in this year's draft. He's quite the specimen. He stands 7'4" and weighs 305 pounds. He's not the quickest in the world, but he's got a pretty good engine on him. 2-time National College Player of the Year, 2-time Kareem Abdul-Jabbar Award winner, which is the award, I think, for the best big man in college football. Was dominant with Purdue. The disappointment that he's not playing in the Olympics, but it makes sense. Like when you look at what he did the last 2 years, it is pretty incredible. 22 and 13, and then 25 and 12. Now, you're adding in 2 blocks a game as well. I think he should be blocking more shots than that, given the physical advantage he has of being so much bigger than everybody else. But there is some suggestion that he was basically told, look, we need you to do so much on the offensive end, including offensive rebounding. Unless you're just in position, don't be overexerting yourself defensively. He's going to need to... Now, look, he's got Jaren Jackson Jr. next to him with the Grizzlies, who's a great defensive player. So maybe he can do similar with the Grizzlies, but it's the NBA. You're not going to be able to take possessions off defensively. And I don't think he's going to be as effective offensively because they've got Ja, they've got Bane. Both of those need the ball a lot. They're not going to run the offense through Edey, but I still think he's going to get really good rebounding numbers at both ends. I think he'll be strong defensively in terms of the rebounding, which is the biggest weakness of Jaren Jackson, who can't rebound at all. So I think that helps that end. And I think he will be a monstrous offensive rebounder. And he'll get a lot of points from just putbacks and lob dunks and stuff. So I could see him being 15 points, 10 rebounds if he's playing 25 minutes a night. I think he'll be pretty efficient. I think there'll be times where he'll look out of place. I think there'll be certain situations where he can't be on the floor. My big concern with him is, can you play him in the playoffs? Or is he going to become too much of a target? Our team's going to roast him in the pick and roll. And I do think that's possible because, when you look at that Memphis team, Bane's a solid defender. Marcus Smart will probably play the 3. He's a great defensive player. And obviously Jackson's a great defensive player at the 4, but you've got weak defenders at 1 and 5. Now, Jean Morant could be a great defender. He's got the speed, the athleticism, he's got the long arms, can move his feet really well. But again, it's more the offensive load he carries. It's quite tiring to also do it defensively. Could he lock in and become a really good defender? Yeah, for sure. But I don't think he's going to. And if you've got defensive weaknesses at 1 and 5, that is going to leave you open to teams roasting you at the pick and roll. With 1-5 pick and rolls against teams like the Timberwolves, if it's Ant and Cat, you're going to be toast. Because either you switch it and Ant is now trying to be guarded by Zach Edey as he turns the corner and gets downhill. Edey's not going to be able to keep up with him. Or Ja is now on Cat, who's got 8 inches of height on him, is an elite shooting big man, can do pick and pop as well as pick and roll. I think that's the type of thing. I think you look at someone like, if it's OKC, if it's, say, Shea, and let's say Jalen Williams, or even Chet Holmgren. Like, Jalen's obviously very different, but Jalen running to the rim against either Edey or Ja, it's a big problem. Either of them trying to guard Shea 1v1 is a big problem. And then you add in the Chet side of it, where Chet can pick and pop. Ja coming out to try and guard Chet Holmgren on the perimeter, and Chet just shooting over him. That's going to be the type of problematic situation. So it could be that they can't switch a lot of those pick and rolls, which can then cause other problems. So my worry with Edey is that I think teams will target him defensively, and I don't know that he can move his feet well enough to stay on the floor. Certainly don't think he can play on the perimeter at all defensively, which means he's going to have to play in the drop, which you can do, but you might leave yourself open to just get killed with mid-range jumpers. And against a team like OKC, for example, they're unbelievably good in the mid-range. You've got Shea, might be the best mid-range shooter in the league. Jalen's great in the mid-range. I think Caruso's good in the mid-range. I think Chet is good in the mid-range. And if they're playing inside your perimeter defense and Edey's at the rim, they don't need to attack the rim. They can just pull up from 15 feet and rain jumpers. And it makes him a liability. Now, Brandon Clark can come into that team instead of Edey, and then they can play more of a 5-out defense. They're not going to have to worry about playing the drop. They can all switch. They can do different things, but that will be less than ideal for your number 9 pick to not be able to play in crunch time in the playoffs. But look, they picked Zaire Williams a few years ago, I think at number 11, and he hasn't worked out for them at all. So the draft record of the Grizzlies has gotten a little bit spotty. Ja was a great pick, but an obvious pick. Jaren Jackson Jr. fell to them because Sacramento made an enormous mistake and picked, what's that guy's name? Marvin Bagley? Yeah, Marvin Bagley. And then obviously the Luka thing was weird as well that year. But Bane was a great pick. That's the one outright great pick they made. But then around that, it's been a lot of spotty drafting. And I like Edey, and I want him to do well. But I do have concerns about how the defensive side of things work out. And I think he's going to be a really efficient, good player, potentially a really good regular season player, like a better version maybe of someone like Jonas Valanciunas. I think that's sort of the ceiling for him. But I do think he might have the same kind of issues that Valanciunas has that sees him spending quite a lot of playoff games sitting on the bench. Reed Shepherd is different. My concern with him is he's a little bit small for a shooting guard. And I don't think he's a point guard in the NBA. Now, I could be wrong. When Steph was coming into the league, a lot of people didn't think he was a point guard. They thought he was going to be a shooting guard. So Reed Shepherd potentially goes that same way. Now, he's not Steph as a shooter, but he is an exceptional shooter from all three levels. He's about the same size as Steph. Doesn't quite have the handle of Steph, but he's got a pretty good handle. I think it's a really good pick. I really do. I think it's a really good pick. If I had the number one pick, probably would have gone with him. This Houston team is really interesting to me, though, because it's hard to see how all the pieces fit together. Like, you look at, let's just say, the young players that they've drafted in the last few years, right? You've got Tari Eason, Jalen Green, you've got Alperen Şengün, Reed Shepherd, Jabari Smith Jr., Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore, right? There's 7 young players. Now, let's just say Şengün is your 5, which he's, I think, a really good young center. Jabari Smith Jr. is your 4. I really like him. I love him on the Timberwolves. I think he's exactly what the Wolves need. Cam Whitmore can play the 3. Tari Eason can play the 3 and the 4. So maybe your front court is good. Okay, maybe between the 4 of them, you're pretty good, because Jabari can play the 5 in some sets. Eason can play the 3 and the 4. Whitmore can play the 3 and probably play some minutes at the 4. But then you've got Green, who's a pure 2, Shepherd, who's kind of a hybrid 1-2, and Thompson, who's either a 1 or a 3. I think needs to be the 1. So you've got all of that. And I could see how you move forward with that, you develop those players, and maybe you get into a situation where you go Thompson 1, Shepherd 2, Whitmore 3, Jabari 4, Şengün 5, and then Eason and Green. Green is your 6th man, Eason is your 7th man. Green is that kind of microwave scorer off the bench, could be very good. He showed some improvements in his ball handling last year. Eason's an intelligent player. He's a decent defensive player, works very hard, can do a bit of everything. So maybe that's what you do, but that will get really expensive. And is Jalen Green going to be happy in that 6th-man role? But where I get confused is you've got Fred VanVleet, who you signed as a free agent to an enormous contract. And then you've got, I suppose, one of the most polarizing players in the league in Dylan Brooks, who's a good player, not a great player. But you signed him to a big contract as well. And those 2 veterans, they're going to want to play as much as possible. So now you've got to push them into the team. So let's say VanVleet comes in as the 1 and Brooks comes in as the 3. So you go VanVleet 1, Shepherd 2, Brooks 3, Jabari 4, Şengün 5. And now you've got Green 6, Thompson 7, Whitmore 8, Eason 9. I don't think those youngsters are going to be happy, and I don't think Amen Thompson is going to develop properly if he's not starting and playing 30, 35 minutes a night. And that's before we get into people like, Aaron Holiday is going to want to play, Jeff Green is going to want to play, I suppose AJ Griffin, who you've just brought over in a trade from Atlanta. Really don't understand why Atlanta were so quick to get off him. I think he's a pretty good player. Didn't show much last season because of injury, but looked pretty good as a rookie to me. I don't know what you're going to do with him. Like, it's a lot of players without obvious sort of slots for them, and I'm not looking at that group and seeing a top 10 NBA player. And we know that to win in this league, you've got to have a top 10 player, ideally a top 5 player. But a top 10 player will do if you've got a really strong supporting cast. I don't see a top 10 player there. I see a lot of good to very good players, a lot of potential, but I just don't really see how all the pieces fit. To me, they scream of a team that's going to do a trade where maybe they send out Şengün, Green, Whitmore, and some picks to try and get back a star, like a star 4 or 5. Let's just say, as an example, let's say Giannis decides he wants out of Milwaukee and he gives his list of places he wants to go, and Houston is on that list because Houston's on that list for a lot of players. I could see something like Jabari Smith, Giannis, Brooks, Shepherd, and Van Vliet working as a 5 and being really, really good, like a deep playoff team, as long as you've got some strength on the bench. So that's where you'd look at, say, Şengün, Green, and Whitmore as the young players in that piece. You'd need to put in some salary filler, and you'd need to throw all the picks into it as well. Like, 3 swaps, 3 firsts, 3 swaps, 4 firsts, whatever you can work. That's what I could see them doing. That's what I think they're lined up to do well. I do just wonder, though, like, what does that leave you with then on your bench? You've got Thompson, you've got Easton. There's not much scoring between them coming off the bench. Maybe Griffin can develop into a bench scorer for you. But I don't know. It's a hard one to look at how the pieces will all fit. They've got a really good coach, a lot of talent, and I really do like the Reed Shepherd addition in terms of the player. I do just wonder about the fit. Like last year, I watched Jalen Green play really well at the end of the year, but funnily enough, that was when Şengün was out. Now, they haven't extended either of them this summer, and a lot of their draft class, the 2021 draft class, are getting the rookie extensions. We've seen Cade get one. We've seen Scotty Barnes get one. We've seen Franz Wagner get one. But we haven't seen Jalen Green. We haven't seen Evan Mobley yet, I don't think. Jalen Suggs, I think, will get one. I don't think it'll be near the max, but he'll get one. Giddey's just been traded to Chicago. I'd be surprised if Chicago don't try and do an extension with him. Zaire Williams actually went to Memphis at number 10 in this draft. I think Şengün, I think a lot of people are surprised he hasn't gotten an extension yet. But then there is some questions of, can you actually build a proper team around him? Like, I think Şengün and Giannis would be better than Jabari and Giannis. I think Şengün as that playmaking 5 would open things up really well. But I think if I'm Milwaukee, I would think I would rather Şengün than Jabari, because I think I can build around Şengün. Jabari's a complementary piece rather than a potential, third best player on a championship team. Jabari's probably your 5th best player on a championship team, and he's a really good player. And like I said, I love him in Minnesota. I think he's exactly what the Wolves could use if they could get off Towns. And I have spent much time trying to figure out a Towns to Houston deal, but it's hard. It's hard without taking back someone like Dylan Brooks, who I don't really want because I just don't like him. He annoys me too much. But anyway, yeah, there's the answer. Right, back after this. Right, welcome back. So, we got news today from Everton Football Club that the proposed takeover of the club by the Friedkin Group has now fallen apart, and there doesn't seem to be another buyer on the horizon. Now, by the sounds of things, Dan Friedkin and his group, his family, decided that the debt owed to 777 was very problematic and not something they wanted to get involved in. And that's going to be an issue for every club, for every potential owner that looks to take over at Everton is that there's an enormous amount of money owed to this questionable group who spent the better part of a year trying to take the club over and making an enormous mess of it. Now, I don't know if the Freaking Group is a massive loss for Everton Football Club, because I look at their tenure as managers of Roma, and it hasn't been littered with success. Now, they did win the Europa Conference League under Jose Mourinho, obviously, but I don't feel like they've made the smartest decisions while they were there. I mean, I love Jose. I wouldn't appoint Jose into a job now. Not if my aim was to be a Champions League team, to win a league title, to win a Champions League, which should be the ambition for Roma. I know it's not historically where they've been, but I do think it should be the ambition for them. They went for the big name. They swung on the big name. And then when that didn't work out and they decided they had to sack him, because Jose's Jose, he had this incredible connection with the fan base. They knew the fan base would be up in arms, so they went for Daniele De Rossi. And I love Daniele De Rossi. He's one of my favourite players of all time. But at the same time, he doesn't have a tremendous track record as a manager. He did well when he took over last year. They've now made it permanent. You wonder, though, have they made themselves hostage to Daniele De Rossi? Like, how would they ever go about sacking him? It's not like Barcelona and Xavi, where Barcelona have a laundry list of legendary players, and Xavi's very close to the top, no question. But they've got many, many legends. Where with Roma, especially in the modern era, you've got Totti and you've got De Rossi, and that's kind of it. They're the two that are held above everybody else from the modern era. Now, there's others that can go back into the 80s and 70s and before, but they're the two. And this fan base is rabid and desperate for success and demands success. But they're also fiercely loyal, as they were to Jose, as they will be to De Rossi, because of who he is, because of what he did in his career. Like, Daniele De Rossi turned down every top club in Europe over the course of his career to stay with Roma. Every top club, all the big clubs in England, all the big clubs in Spain, Bayern Munich, the other big clubs in Italy, they all tried for him, and he turned all of them down to stay with Roma. Turned down untold money, untold honours, just to stay with Roma. And, like, look, he won 2 Coppa Italias with them. And for him, that meant more than going to Real Madrid and winning a bunch of European Cups or whatever the case might have been for him. But he turned down all those offers to stay. The fans adore him. He didn't leave until right at the end of his career, and he only went to Boca because he wanted something really different. And in the end, he played 7 games there because, you know, he was broken down at that point. But he turned down so many great offers to stay there. Never got a team worthy of his talent built around him. Played at an exceptional level for 10, 12 years. He was undeniably brilliant. He was a world-class player in a mediocre team for a long time, holding them above where they should have been, which is probably in the bottom half for many, many years. And every time he did get a good team around him, all of a sudden it would get broken up because, you know, finances would come into it. I don't know how they go about sacking him. So I don't think the Freaking Group have done a particularly good job with Roma. I think there's aspects of what they've done that's good, but overall, I just don't think it's been a big success. Despite, you know, the silverware is great, but I just don't think it's been a big success. But it does now leave the question of where next for Everton Football Club, who have to be getting close to the brink of administration. Like, they have to be. And if that ownership group are not going to buy them, and there doesn't seem to be anybody else in the market for them currently, in part because there's a ton of debt to not just to this 777 group, but also to Michael Dell's group, and the debt on the stadium. Like, that stadium has to be finished as well. So anyone buying Everton is looking at probably close to, I don't know, 750 million of an investment for a club that's probably worth 350 million as things currently stand. Now, I know you get the stadium as part of it, but you then have to put more money in. You know, once the stadium's up and running, it's not just that it's all profit. There's huge costs involved in running that stadium. Like, look at Sunderland and the cost of running the Stadium of Light and what that nearly did to them. Look at Darlington, who had to move out of that big stadium they had because they couldn't afford to run it. Running a stadium is very expensive. There's constant maintenance costs, there's constant staffing costs, there's constant utility costs. So there's all that money to be spent, and you're not getting an elite level club. You know, you're getting a club that's been mismanaged and allowed to go to rot for a long, long time. And I do, like, I would find it funny in a way if Everton got relegated, but I would never want to see them at risk of financial ruin. As much as I might slate them for the just horrendous financial mismanagement, the incompetence over the last decade, I'd never want to see Everton at risk of disappearing. And I don't think there is a real risk of them disappearing, but if they go into administration, that's an automatic 10 or 12 points off next season's tally. They start the season on -10. Now, they've got a good manager. They've got a pretty decent group of players. I still think they'd have a shot at staying up, but I don't think next season is like this past season. I don't think we've got 3 teams that you can just look at and say, oh, well, they're going down. Now, I didn't think Burnley would go down last season. I've said that. I didn't think they'd go down. I actually thought Everton would, because I thought Everton would get their punishments for the cheating that they'd undertaken. And I thought they'd get punished properly. I didn't realise the FA, or the Premier League rather, would bend the knee and have the points deductions. I thought they'd get hit with the full whack on both, which would have been 10 points each. And if Everton had been docked 10 points for each of their years of violating the Premier League's rules, they would have gone down. As it was, they were docked 8 points. So they finished on 40. If they'd been docked, actually, to be fair, if they'd been docked another 12 points, which is what I think should have happened, they still would have stayed up. But I didn't factor in Company being as stupid as he was. I did think Sheffield United and Burnley would go down, but I thought, Sheffield United and Luton would go down, but I thought Burnley would be better than they were. But you see the teams coming up this year, and I mean, Leicester are coming up. I know they've lost the manager, they've lost the best player. At the same time, I quite like the manager they've brought in, and I think there's a decent squad there of many Premier League proven players. I think the defence needs work, but there is a lot of Premier League proven players there. Southampton, again, a lot of Premier League proven players. I don't think you can immediately write them off as going back down. I think they've done smart business so far. Ipswich are the one that have the weakest squad, you would say, because it's a lot of the players that were there in League One, but don't underestimate the power of continuity. Like, remember Sheffield United came up with largely a League One squad, added a couple of pieces, and then finished 9th. Don't underestimate Ipswich. Kieran McKenna's a brilliant manager. They've made good moves so far. They'll make more. I'm not keen on the Muric deal, but they've made good deals. Don't underestimate them. Don't assume they're going straight back down. They could surprise people if they get off to a good start. What if Everton get off to a bad start? What if they start the league with -10 and get off to a bad start, and then after 3 weeks they're looking at the table and they're 14 points behind everybody? Like, that could be really, really tough for them. I do think a buyer will be found, but it wouldn't surprise me if it was post-administration, and that's going to be very tough for Everton. That not only affects them moving forward, but it affects the process of buying them. It will mean the club will probably have to go for a little bit less, which Mashiri's not going to be too happy about. It'll also mean that I think certain owners that might have just said, you know what, there's big potential here. There's a bit of a mess to sort out, but I've got the money, or we've got the money. Let's just go in and do it, and we can sort it out over time. Even if we have to tread water for a year or two and not do huge amounts with the squad, we'll talk to Sean Dyche. We'll make him see the long-term vision here, and we'll be good. That becomes a lot harder when you've got a 10-point deduction to begin with that puts you at immediate risk of relegation. Right, I'll be back after this. Right, welcome back. So, Eddie Howe has said he is committed to Newcastle and made links to the England job. I said I think it'll be Graham Potter. I said if not Potter, I think Carsley. I do think that's the two. I do think it'll be one of those two who gets that job. And I think ultimately they're both pretty good options. We're just going to do 2 days worth of gossip and be done for today. I know it's a quick one, but we'll be done. Let's see. Everton's Amadou Onana is set to complete his move to Aston Villa this weekend. I believe that's kind of highlighting Monday as the day for it to be announced. Jurgen Klopp is not interested in taking the England job. Nobody is surprised. The Football Association are willing to wait for Pep Guardiola to leave Man City before appointing him. This is fanciful stuff. This is Big Mig. I'm guessing the idea there would be Carsley for a year and then Pep. I just don't know that Pep would take the England job. He might, you never know. Be a bit much though if he gets the England job and then it comes out that he was involved in all of City's cheating and knew about it all for his entire tenure. Ange Postecoglou is among the candidates to replace Southgate. He said he has no interest. Atletico Madrid want Julian Alvarez to replace Alvaro Morata. Arsenal's move for Ricardo Calafiori has been held up because the clubs cannot agree on a fee. Arsenal can't afford what the Italians want for him. Manchester United have turned down a bid for Scott McTominay. Surprise. Al Nazir's pursuit of Wojciech Szczesny has broken down. PSG has stepped up their interest in Victor Osimhen. Makes little sense considering they spent a fortune on 2 strikers last summer. He's better than both, but you need more help in wide areas. But away with you. Liverpool pulled out of the race to sign Lenny Yoro because they thought he was only interested in Real Madrid. No, the actual reason was that they had set a price on what they would pay, and United paid ridiculously more and also gave him ridiculously more in wages than what Liverpool would have been offering, and also paid a ridiculous consultancy fee to his family on top of a ridiculous agent fee to George Mendes. That's why Liverpool didn't move for him. It's the same reason Real Madrid didn't move for him. It's the same reason PSG didn't move for him. And the primary reason he's gone to United is because Leo told him, if you don't go to United, we're going to freeze you out. You're going to sit you in the reserves. You earn $5,000 a week and we don't care. We're happy to lose it. Birmingham were interested in Louis Barry of Aston Villa. Villa still owe Bayer Leverkusen more than half the money they paid for Moussa Diaby, who is close to joining Al Ittihad. That is standard. That's what installments are for. West Ham are winning the race to sign Reece Nelson. Doubt it. Crescencio Somerville has held talks with Chelsea, but Rennes have also spoken to him. Rennes would be a good move for him. Huddersfield are in talks to sign Joe Hodge after he spent last season on loan at QPR. I wonder, is that a loan or a permanent deal? Barcelona have made their proposal to Nico Williams in an attempt to agree personal terms with the Spaniard before any of the English clubs who are interested. West Ham are in advanced talks to sign Aaron Wan-Bissaka from Manchester United. It is team talk, so it might or might not be true. West Ham are in talks to sign N'Golo Kante for a deal which could cost in the region of 20 million. Look, Kante is fantastic, and once a month he can still give you a really good performance, but he's injury prone and he just can't do it consistently. So if he's one of 3 starting midfielders, that's really good. As long as you've got 3 for 2 positions, that's really good. Just don't try and play him every game. Fulham want to bring in Andre as they look to replace João Palhinha. He's not a replacement for Palhinha. He would partner Palhinha if Palhinha had stayed, but he's not a replacement for him. Arsenal look set to end their interest in Mark Guehi because Crystal Palace are demanding more than 70 million for him. Tottenham are aiming to beat Fulham to the signing of Scott McTominay. That sounds like a lie. Brentford are expected to reduce their asking price to less than 50 million for Ivan Toney because of lack of interest. Yeah, because he's got 1 year left in his contract. He's going to get an offer. They're going to get an offer of 35 million at the end of the window, is my guess. Manchester United remain interested in Manuel Ugarte. Tottenham have been in daily contact with the representatives of Jonathan David. That could be a good move. I think that would work. Chelsea plan to reward Cole Palmer with incremental wage rises. They're going to give him a massive new contract, and we all need to stop pretending that anything Chelsea do is smart or well thought out. They're just going to give him a massive contract on whatever money he wants. QPR are interested in signing former Bayern Munich winger Sarpreet Singh, who's 25, okay? Riccardo Calafiore has asked to take part in Bologna's pre-season as Arsenal try to reach an agreement. Doesn't sound like he's overly keen on the move then. Chelsea have reportedly approached RC Lens to sign Elia Wahi. They tried to get him last summer, so it wouldn't surprise me. Lyon are reportedly set to announce Southampton's 16-year-old Alejandro Gomez Rodriguez as their new signing after he signed a 3-year deal with them. And then finally, Chelsea have reportedly asked PSG about Randall Kolo Muani and Goncalo Ramos. So we might get a little merry-go-round there where maybe Lukaku does go to Napoli, Osimhen goes to PSG, and one of the two land at Chelsea. Of course, neither of them are, well, maybe Ramos, but Kolo Muani's not a natural goal scorer. So it doesn't really solve their issue. He's a better version of Nicholas Jackson. Maybe they want that. Maybe. It's so funny with Kolo Muani, though. Like, you think back 2 years ago, 2 summers ago, he was playing for Nantes. He was seen as a pretty good player, not an elite level player. His contract ran out. He did not have teams queuing up to sign him. He'd had two seasons as a first choice player in the Nantes team, 10 in 40 and 13 in 41. He left on a free. He went to Eintracht Frankfurt. He had one great season, 23 goals in 46 games. And he lands himself at PSG, who had no interest in him the year before. No interest at all when he was a free agent. They paid €85 million for him off one season. And now apparently they're preparing to move on from him. It's just madness. Absolute madness. Goncalo Ramos, he'd had 2 seasons as a starter with Benfica. He scored 8 goals in 46, and then he exploded the next year with 27 and 47. And PSG decided, we have to have him. So they spent 80 million on him, and he scored 14 and 40 in the French league. Not great, really, is it? PSG, flittering money away for many's a year. Right, folks, that'll do me for the week. I will see you all on Monday. Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
Sports Social Podcast Network.